The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, greetings from Minneapolis, everybody. Come to your cordless. It's Tuesday night, September 2nd, 2025. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. God, have I missed you? Have I missed you people? I have. Oh, this is episode number 269, if you're keeping score at home. Someday there'll be a test. Keep score. Yeah, we took 12 days off, or actually, I think 5 days of actual shows. But yeah, I've been busy. We've been doing stuff I'm going to tell you about here in just a second. But one thing I noticed that we only have one guest tonight, and I told you I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks. We're going to be booking basically two guests to show, but not tonight because our second guest fell through at the last minute. I'm kind of glad he did because I got a lot of stuff here because I've been collecting news for 12 days. I can't not do it at this point. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. It's basically my brain's in a fog anyway. It's a good thing for me to do during that time. And I will spend a good 3-4 hours doing it, and I can't not do it. I mean, even if I wasn't doing this show, I'd be doing it anyway. It's really terrible. So I collected over the course of 12 days. I collected just a boatload of stuff to talk about. So, and also our interview ended up, because we don't have a second guest tonight, I let it go a little long, too. We're talking to Scott Walter. He's the CEO of Capital Research Group, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., and he's also a former special advisor to President George W. Bush on domestic policy. And he's written a book called Arabella, and that may not mean anything to you. Now, it's really interesting. I've been trying to get this guy on for 2 months, and because I'm so fascinated with this subject. It's basically about dark money in politics. So he will explain to you, we taped this afternoon, he will explain to you that Arabella Advisors, which is not a nonprofit organization, it's actually a consulting firm, runs or has set up hundreds of nonprofit organizations to funnel or essentially launder money for Democratic candidates all across the country. And I mean, I knew about this. Now, the interesting thing is, like I said, I've been thinking about this guy for 2 months. 2 weeks ago was the first time I ever saw in the news, in passing, any reference to Arabella Advisors. I think it was on Fox News. I think it was one of the morning news shows they have in the morning. I think it wasn't an opinion program. I don't think. The first time I ever saw any reference to it. But yeah, Scott's joining us. We had a fascinating discussion. You want to hear about what this guy has to say? You know, really, seriously, here's what it comes down to, folks. The world is corrupt as hell. I'm just going to tell you. That's the deal. Yeah, you can go to bed thinking about that, and it's corrupt as hell. The aliens, the extraterrestrials are here, and climate change is complete bullshit. That's what basically you need to know to get through life. That's it. Those last two things, those are my missions. I got a friend of mine watches his show regularly, and he says, you won't commit to anything. And partly he's right, because other than those two issues, I mean, you choose your battles, but other than those couple things, yeah, I'm appalled by the usual stuff people are appalled by everything, but I don't feel I have a horse in any fight, which I think actually helps me do this particular role. I do. I talk to people, and my goal is to let them say what they have to say. If I don't like what they have to say, or I'm not interested, I don't bring them on the show. It's simple. And then people also ask me, you never have any liberals on. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if you noticed, most of them are nuts. The ones that I would like to have on are too busy talking to other people. They won't come on. So, yeah, it's not that I don't want any of them on. I can't get the liberals I want on the show to come on. I can't. So, there you go. Yeah. All right. And so, okay, so like I said, we're trying to get two guests a show on starting we're basically starting a new season tonight. That's the way I look at this. So it's not really true. We started the show in 2023 on July 31st. So they got kind of a month there, but that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at this as our third season, basically. We're starting. Uh, tomorrow, hold on. Tomorrow, Wayne Morrow is going to be here. And this is really interesting. He's the CEO of the John Birch Society. I don't know about you, but the John Birch Society's been around since 1958. I remember hearing about this when I was in grade school. I mean, this is and high school. This is actually kind of cool. I've been hearing about this organization my entire life. Well, we're going to talk to the guy who runs it tomorrow. Uh, that's yeah, his name is Wayne Morrow. He's coming on tomorrow. On Thursday, we have our author and farmer Brian Reisinger is coming back. He was here about 6 weeks ago when his book came out called Land Rich and Cash Poor, and the paperback of the paperback version was coming out today, and so we're having him. He'll be on here on Thursday, and I'm hesitant to announce this, but we probably will have a second guest on Thursday, but we haven't absolutely confirmed that yet. So I'm not gonna say who it is, but that's a pretty cool guy too. So yeah, and we're not taking any calls tonight. I have to tell you, since we're changing the format of the show a little bit for two guests a show, we're not going to take many calls anymore. I'm thinking about maybe we have one night a week where we take phone calls. I will actually clear the deck and we'll only do like one guest, and it will probably be Fridays. Now, I got some interesting news. Like you're thinking, well, I'm just sitting around eating bonbons for 12 days, and it kind of was. It's really terrible. In a month, I'm going to be 70. In my youth, and I'm going back to even to my mid 40s here. I could work and did work 16, 15, 20 hours a day. I had no trouble doing it. I think I pissed people off in the places I work because I work so hard. I love doing what I'm doing. Pretty much, I'm a simpleton from a little town in Minnesota, and I think that people were either found me they were either envious of me or they found me annoying, one or the other, because I worked so much and I enjoyed it. There was a stretch in the late 1990s where I only slept 4 hours a day. I was going to the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, consistently, like every day. I would go to the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning. You go to a 24-hour gym at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody there. You get the whole place to yourself. It's fantastic. Shoot some baskets. It's like, dude, swim a couple laps. It was terrific. I loved it. And then after 3 years of that, I realized my mind is mush. I can't. This is not going to work. President Trump only sleeps 4 hours a day, and I actually think it's not good for him. I'm not even talking about his health. I don't. I think, I mean, he seems pretty clear headed anyway. I know a lot of you who don't like him would disagree with me, but I don't know if that's. Jay Leno apparently is the same way, and at least I don't know about now, but when he was on the Tonight Show, I could tell. There's after doing that myself, you can tell. I can tell now when people are permanently sleep deprived. I can't explain it, but I can tell. Any rate, so I did have to do some stuff this week. The reason I brought that up is because now at 70, I'm unbelievably lazy. I mean, I have no trouble sitting on the couch and watching watching Fox News with my cat for hours. It's unbelievable. I mean, the change is like Mia's market. But I did actually do some stuff this week, and I'm very happy to tell you about it. We're back on Facebook. The show is back on Facebook. We have a page up and running. I'm not going to give you the address yet because I'm trying to reclaim our previous address. Everywhere we broadcast, our our URL is Jim at Night. And it was on Facebook until they banned our page. And of course, I set up a new page now. And they said, as I assumed, that we couldn't use that URL because it was in use. And of course, it isn't because I had it and they can't it. So I'm trying to talk them into giving it back to me. So we'll see how that goes. And also, we finally figured out we're now going to regularly post shorts on both YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. And we're actually getting quite, TikTok fascinates me. First of all, it kind of appalls me. I don't know if you ever spent any time on there, but a lot of that stuff I don't find entertaining. But what do I know? Not only that, I'm posting shorts from our interviews, 1 to 3 minute interview videos, and they're vertically oriented, as everything on most of the stuff on these shorts are. I would post one, and nobody knows me worth crap, and 300 views in an hour. Really? It's like, okay. So, the thing I want to get into is I actually want to start broadcasting the show on TikTok, and there's a few hoops we have to jump through to do that. And also, they just changed their policy. So now it used to be that you couldn't do a live broadcast on TikTok over an hour, but they've changed that now. Now it's as long as you want. So we will be able to run the whole, which is good. The timing worked out well. We will be able to run the whole show there every night. So that's what we're working on that too. So yeah, we got it going on. We're okay, Boomer. Yeah. So without any further ado, let's get Scott Walter on here. Okay. We'll do that in 12 seconds. All right. Joining us from his home in Sterling, Virginia, Scott Walter. He's the president of the Capital Research Institute and former special assistant to George W. Bush administration on, was it domestic policy? Is that right?
Correct.
And you're also the vice president of the
I was the vice president.
Oh, okay. Philanthropy roundtable, but not anymore, huh?
Yeah, no, that's a few jobs ago. That was before the George W.
And your new book is Arabella, the dark money network of the leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. And I can't tell you, I wanted to have you on for months. So this is fantastic because I'm really, really fascinated in this subject. First of all, how did you stumble onto this whole thing? Or were you aware of this, or what? Like, give me a pass through here. What's going on?
Sure. The introduction to the book goes through the story in more detail, but the gist is this: if you remember the horrible Kavanaugh summer back in 2018, where now Justice Kavanaugh was nominated to take Anthony Kennedy's place, and it was one of the ugliest fights. Well, I take that back. It was the single ugliest fight for the Supreme Court ever, which is really saying, I say that as somebody who is a friend of Judge Robert Bork, who probably had the previous record. No, I take that back. Clarence Thomas had the previous record.
Thomas made it, but still,
again,
that was
the hatred of the left for the Constitution and the rule of law, as seen in their savage attacks on these honorable men, is off the charts. But anyway, when Justice Kennedy announced he was retiring, and before the president had even nominated Kavanaugh, I got a call from the Senate Judiciary Committee, an old friend there, saying, we don't even have a nominee yet. And Chairman Grassley and the committee and everyone is being, and the president, they're all being brutally attacked by something called demand justice. And we've never heard of this or can't find anything out about it. And so I said, we can figure it out. So we started looking into demand justice.
Well, who are you? Who is
Sorry, Capital Research Center, my think tank.
You're doing that then. All right. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And capitalresearchcenter.org if anybody wants to dig deeper. So my folks dug into this and they discovered, well, the reason that none of us had heard of it was that it was only a month or two old. It had been birthed out of the Democracy Alliance, which is a cabal of about 100 billionaires and centimillionaires on the left, co-founded by George Soros. And they had had a meeting a month or two before, and a guy had pitched to them the creation of demand justice, whose mission would be to attack every single nominee of President Trump for the judiciary, from the Supreme Court to the most obscure federal court. And Soros had stroked him a check for $1 million or $2 million, and they were off to the races. And that's why we were now seeing all this. And the thing is, though, my guys were superb, and then they figured out demand justice didn't at the time actually exist as its own legal entity. It was what you call in the business a fiscally sponsored project of the 1630 Fund, which is a 501c4 political nonprofit. C4 nonprofits are like the National Rifle Association or the League of Conservation Voters, the ones that
yes. Could you tell me what's the difference between a C3 and a C4 nonprofit?
Sure. A C4, the examples for the conservative would be National Rifle Association or Legal Conservation Voters on the left. They are political nonprofits, which is, say, they're allowed to engage a lot in politics. They can endorse candidates, and they can give money to super PACs that are going to make independent expenditures on behalf of candidates and whatnot.
Whereas a C3 is my local museum or symphony orchestra.
Yeah, the C3 is the technical term there is going to be public charity. Right now, my think tank is a C3. Most think tanks are C3s, like the Heritage Foundation. Everybody's heard of. Well, that's a 501c3 think tank like me.
Right.
And they're activist groups that are C3s, because a C3 group can be dedicated to can talk about political issues like abortion or school choice or environmentalism and all, but they can't legally endorse candidates or that sort of thing. Now, on the left, they actually use a ton of C3 work to register the right demographics to elect the political party they want. That's a scandal that may or may not get taken care of in this administration, I hope. But anyway, the other thing about the C3s that makes them different is they're the only nonprofit that you get a tax deduction when you write the check to them. That's the most.
So you don't for C4?
Yeah, C4. A C4 is a nonprofit because it's not taxed, right? If it takes in more money than it spends, it's not taxed like a business is that makes a profit that way. But only the C3 groups are ones that the donors get a tax deduction. Okay.
Okay.
So this C4 fiscally sponsored project called Demand Justice of the 1630 Fund C4. Well, my people kept digging because we dig deep, and we discovered, okay, well, the 1630 Fund does have its own legal existence as a C4, but it doesn't just fiscally sponsor demand justice at the time. It fiscally sponsors dozens of other attack groups of the left. Oh, and it's managed by something called Arabella Advisors, which is a for-profit consulting firm, Beltway Bandit, as they say in DC. So, and guess what? The 1630 Fund is not the only nonprofit that Arabella Advisors manages. There are a half dozen nonprofits that Arabella Advisors manages. So that's how we uncovered Arabella. Now, legally speaking, those big nonprofits like the 1630 Fund that was creating demand justice, legally speaking, they just hire Arabella Advisors, to operate themselves, right? Assist us in operating ourselves. But in fact, it's the folks at the for-profit Arabella who created these nonprofits.
Right.
And legally, they're distinct, right? Arabella Advisors LLC is a for-profit corporation, and the 1630 Fund is a nonprofit corporation, and they're not the same entity in a technical legal sense. But surprise, surprise, the Arabella Advisors is really creating and operating these places. And we have some of their internal emails that they've sent to people like the governor of Oregon and Washington, and those show that you have, those show that Arabella is really running things, and the nonprofits exist. The biggest value that nonprofits have is that's where outside people write the checks, right?
Right.
So if you can write a check to an Arabella C3 and get a tax deduction, or more frequently, if you are yourself a private foundation, right, like the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation, well, the Gates Foundation can mainly just give to other C3s. It's not, it normally wouldn't be able legally to give to a C4, much less a political campaign, etc. So what it does is it can write checks to Arabella's C3s that it couldn't write to Arabella Advisors, the for-profit company.
Right. Do the Republicans have anything an analog to this? Because I'm just going to guess before you even say anything that they do, but it's not, quote unquote, not as bad.
Well, here's the thing: nobody has an operation like this as big as Arabella's empire.
Oh, really?
Their empire is in the billions of dollars.
Yeah. So
for every election cycle.
All right, before you go on, how many of these C4 nonprofits have they created? How many are under their umbrella?
There are, at the latest count, there are 4 C4s and 3 C3s.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say more, but I thought maybe.
Well, no. Keep in mind so think of it as a pyramid, right? The Arabella Advisors for-profit is at the top of the pyramid. In the middle of the pyramid, you have the half dozen nonprofits of different legal types. And then there's the base of that's the base of the pyramid. What you see, what your listeners see, are those fiscally sponsored projects. And there literally are hundreds upon hundreds of them. And they all have wonderful names: Floridians for a Fair Shake, Secure Michigan Elections, Keep Iowa Healthy, right? All wonderful things. And they want you to think those are your neighbors who are upset about something, when in fact, it's just some goofball in a DC office who popped up a website and bought some Facebook ads.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they're very good at coming up with these names. I got to give them the credit for that.
Oh, it's brilliant. Marketing and PR, they're excellent.
All right. So how many, you were talking about the fact that it was not Demand Justice, but the one above that,
1630 fund.
1630 fund. There were about 100 like billionaire donors to this, right? Is roughly, or a millionaire?
It was a Democracy Alliance meeting that agreed to where there was an agreement to send money. Soros was the main check writer. We don't know for sure if there were other check writers, but it was that Democracy Alliance meeting where you had about 100 billionaires and centimillionaires.
Scott,
looking at things like this to decide where do we invest.
Have you been able to identify, regardless of who the actual CEO of Arabella or any of these nonprofits are, have you been able to identify who actually runs all this? Like where the buck stops for all this stuff?
Well, we have a terrific website, influencewatch.org. Influencewatch.org. That is our online Wikipedia of the left. So if you go in there and you search for Arabella Advisors, you'll find all 7 of those nonprofits, and then you can go look at their entries. Click on there, and it's all interrelated like Wikipedia. You click on their entries, and you can see who are the big donors to the 1630 fund, or the New Venture Fund, or the Hopewell Fund, yada yada. So now you can't we can't identify every penny of the money,
right?
Because what we can identify, though, is when other nonprofits give them money, like the Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation or Soros's Open Society Foundation or whatever, we cross-reference all those things. We track all of that is on the public record, and it's most of their money. It's not all, but it's most of their money.
And so my assumption is that at some point, one of the major donors is actually driving all this. Would that be Soros or somebody else, or like a handful of them together,
Well,
or what do you think?
Well, it is, in writing my book, one of the things I discovered there's a new paperback edition out just a month ago that's revised and expanded from the hardback. And one of the biggest updates is we discovered that Arabella Advisors, the for-profit, had sold themselves to a billionaire's family office a few years ago. So what I always say to answer your question is that Arabella is absolutely in the business of creating government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, for the billionaires. So there are a relatively small number of billionaires that are mixed up in this, but don't just think Gates and Soros and Zuckerberg. You also need to think of a bunch of other billionaires that all have the same last name, Foundation. Because the MacArthur Foundation is every bit as evil a billionaire as, George Soros.
Yeah.
And so is the Ford Foundation. In fact, it's almost unheard of to find a group that gets money from Soros that doesn't get money from Ford.
Uh-huh.
And by the way, Ford invented I'm glad you're sitting down on this. Ford Foundation invented women's studies. Think of all the damage done to the souls of Americans and the country. But
not to mention just graduates who never got a job.
Yeah, that too. Although, to be fair, that's sort of natural consequences. So
okay, so you've got all right, and I'm sure that we're not even, technically not just talking about billionaires, but we're talking about 100 millionaires too,
oh, yes.
You've got a bunch of very wealthy people. As far as I can tell, now I master the obvious here, but I'm going to set something up. These people want control just because they want control. They don't actually want to accomplish anything per se. It's just that I think, is it a defensive measure that by taking control, the Republicans don't have control? Because they obviously, I mean, this is the problem we have going on, the tension in our government right now is that Trump is basically exposing everybody's incompetence. But I don't even wonder if it's incompetence. I just wonder if they're just not interested in doing anything. So, I mean, where are you on this?
Well, that's definitely a complicated question. But I think what you start out with, I can 100% agree that as far as I can understand, I can't read people's minds, but as far as I can see, this is definitely about control. And because in a way, one of the most powerful patterns for everything Arabella does, they have never, to my knowledge, done anything that would increase power, authority, and freedom of individuals and local communities, right? They don't care about Ottumwa, Iowa,
right,
or Boise, or anything like that. They are always for things that are going to further take away freedom, responsibility, authority from those places and stick it in Washington, D.C. Now, I will say that it's much easier for a billionaire to influence Washington, D.C. than it is everybody in Pascagoula and Boise and the rest. So that might be part of it.
It's one-stop shopping, basically, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what it is.
I'm going to steal that. That's a great line.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But having said that, I also think that, if you understand the human soul, like St. Augustine was one of the most brilliant psychological insight people of all time. And, he said there's lust for the flesh, which is what we normally think of when we say lust, right? We think, I want that beautiful gal there or whatever. But there's lust for power.
Yes.
Sounds great in Latin, libido dominandi, right? There's lust for power. And the other thing that both Augustine and Plato and Aristotle and the ancient Jews, everybody who was wise thousands of years ago, completely understood that human wants are infinite, right? The average person thinks, well, if I had $1 billion, I'd be lying around my yacht and, not bothering anybody.
No.
But because you think that your current desires would be satisfied with that $1 billion.
Yeah.
But apparently that is not how humans work. Even humans with a lot of billions want more power.
My accountant represents she tells me about 75 extremely wealthy men, very powerful men, and she says it's very simple. If you have $10 million, you want another $10 million.
Yes,
At that point, she says they're keeping score. Money is just to keep score. It's not, they don't need to buy anything else. It's like, yeah. Yeah, I am fascinated, and it's partly my naivety, I suppose, growing up in a Midwestern farm town. That I'm fascinated by people who want power just to have it. They don't even want to accomplish anything. I mean, that does seem to be. That's the come I even asked you. Is the whole thing about Democratic politics a defensive move to keep Republicans out of power?
Well, they certainly, again, how much of this they believe and how much is press releases, it's hard to tell. But they certainly talk all the time. People in this class talk about any sort of populist effort to have less power in Washington and less transformation of the American regime, right? They supposedly that's an unbelievably evil is going to be unleashed if this happens. But as you say, so what we have to do is make sure you still have all your power and preferably more than you already have of your power, right?
Right.
I mean, a guy like a Chuck Schumer does not stand up and say, man, Elvira, New York, that's where I want there to be more power.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, as a matter of fact, it seems to me, I mean, we could talk for hours about the whole Trump phenomenon. I mean, at first, no one thought he was going to win, and so there's that. Although I got to admit, I predicted he was going to win, and that shocked everybody who knew me. But one of the things is that they simply didn't want him to disrupt the status quo, and that's not just Democrats. I mean, I don't have to tell you this. Half of the Republicans are rhinos, so it's like everyone's on the take and everyone's on the dole. And it's like, well, if you get this guy in there, and of course a guy, an extremely rich man who does not actually need the money, so he might actually, just decide to cut the whole thing loose. That scares the crap out of a lot of people. I don't have to tell you.
Oh yeah, no. It's like I do a lot of work with the Doge folks, right? Because that's Lord knows we've have no trouble uncovering endless things. I'll brag on the team real quick. Arabic Elmo, the president mentioned that in his joint address to Congress. You may remember that was us before he was even in office.
Oh, that's really cool.
And the trans opera in Colombia. That one we had in 2023 because we were looking at all the trans funding under the Biden administration. So the Doge is trying to cut those grants to ridiculous things that should never have gotten your tax dollars. Well, no shortage of Republicans blocking that.
Yeah, right.
So,
it's a
big problem.
I've been figuring, I've been following this too. As a matter of fact, and no offense to you at all, and also what Elon Musk has been doing, but I think everybody expected there to be more cuts than there have been so far. And that's because I'm assuming that you guys can't get in and say, well, we're going to cut this and this and this. And somebody steps up and says, no, you can't, so it's a constant fight. But the problem is if we don't succeed at this, the government is going to collapse. I don't have to tell you. I don't buy. Look, I have economists on this show all the time. It's kind of a thing of mine, but I don't buy any of this quote unquote modern monetary theory. It's just bullshit, Scott. It's all it will end up. It will be our demise. It's all crap. And sooner or later, the government will collapse because of the amount of the national debt. There's just, it's just a ticking time bomb. I don't know. My personal 2 bits, but that's what I do on the show.
I'm no economist, so you shouldn't ask me for predictions, but it's hard to see much reality there. And, in the end, reality wins every fight. You can keep reality at bay for a surprising amount of time in many different ways, but eventually reality wins.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing that what's even happened with the election here. We have a minority the Democrats, or I will say the leftists, not even liberals. The leftists are in a distinct minority, and yet they are bitching and moaning about the fact that things aren't going the way they want. And then they're doing these protests. I just had lunch with a friend of mine a few days ago who said, well, look at all these protests that are happening. Yeah, but the reason the protests are happening is because they're trying to convince the public and the media, which I have to ask you about in a second, they're actually in a majority position, that all these people think this, and they don't. I mean, every single survey that's been done, I mean, right now Trump is basically clowning them with all this stuff on crime, because so you're for crime, and yeah, apparently they are, because they don't want to change anything, So actually, all right, and I'm bouncing around all over the place, but here's another question. So now, I don't know if you've been following what's going on in the UK, and they're basically on the verge of civil war over there. And I know that there was a thing 50 years ago called Project Nightingale, where the CIA literally paid prominent journalists in the United States either to change stories or not report them, one or the other. First of all, do you think that's going on right now? And is Arabella, through their tentacles, are they actually paying and are they paying legislatures, congressmen, to actually do their bidding? Is money actually changing hands here, or is it just influence?
Well, I certainly don't have any documentation to prove that folks are getting paid like that.
Before you go on,
the game. The other thing is that the game, that's a very dangerous game. Anybody who ever tries to play.
Yeah, well, that's why are they trying?
So it's much more sophisticated and safe to do influence operations, right? To boost the issues that their favored politicians are trying to ride. And I mean, so a third of Arabella's work is environmental stuff, and the founder was radicalized by an enviro nut back in his college days. And my favorite poll last time I was testifying this is in front of Sheldon Whitehouse, right? Big enviro fiend, deep friend of League of Conservation Voters and Arabella and the rest. And in preparing the testimony, I was looking up some of the latest polls, and even I am shocked at how little support, right? There was one poll that found 2/3 of Americans. This is it wasn't a Pew poll, but it wasn't some right-wing, outfit poll.
A legitimate poll, right?
Yeah. It was a completely mainstream pollster who found 2/3 of Americans when you said, how much are you willing to pay a month for to do enviro reforms? Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Not a penny.
Right.
2 out of 3 Americans. Right. Now, there's countless other things. I care a lot about election integrity. I've testified on election integrity issues and the rest. The mainstream media, who are just the stenographers of the leftist politicians, to this day insist that, if you want voter ID, you belong to the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, that's right. I know that.
Even though 80% or more of Black people and brown people support voter ID.
Right. I know. I'm perfectly aware of this.
Insane.
It is totally insane. Right. And so they're constantly trying to convince the public that they're in the majority position, and they're not, especially lately. I mean, so no, it is totally insane. I spent a lot of time on the show talking about this stuff. All right. So here's another question. Why do you think the mainstream media, at the end of the day, why are they in bed with the Democrats? It's because they themselves. Now, I've been involved in the media all my life, 50 freaking years. So I know, and I don't have to tell you this, every Pointer Institute poll that's done every other year for the last 40 years, 90% of all journalists are liberals. I think that just goes along with the profession. Those are the people that want to do it. So is that the reason they're in bed with the Democrats? I mean, years ago there was at least a pretense of some unbiasedness, but now that's completely gone. What do you think? And I gotta before you answer, I gotta tell you. So this entire show is built on speculation, but the reason I want you and people like you on here is because your speculation, because of your experience, it has a lot more weight than mine and most other people's. So please, please, you can qualify yourselves, but please feel free to speculate.
Well, I think there certainly would be several factors. One factor in recent years that's become critical is the sheer money, right? Which is to say, if the Washington Post doesn't print left-wing trash, most of its remaining subscribers disappear.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
That's just, that's a huge thing that the all of media has segmented so that almost everybody only looks at the things they agree with.
Right.
So that's one thing. A second thing is the education, right? I mean, in the good old days, reporters typically wouldn't even have a college degree, and certainly wouldn't have a journalism degree. They might, if they went to college, they might have actually learned something. I mean, God knows you don't learn squat in a journalism course. So that made a big difference. You had, that they would be more like ordinary people rather than like the uniparty of DC. So the education is a problem. And then third, however, I'll end though with what you said, that's the kind of people, right? Like they want to go into journalism because they buy this notion that America is just this huge, monstrous, horrible thing, and people have to attack it and radically transform it if it's ever going to be even remotely decent. And so that, which political party is going to be fit better with that? The one that says America was founded very decently and is mostly, not perfectly, but mostly been a good country, or the one that says, systemic racism infects everything in America, or systemic this, systemic that, yada, yada, capitalism, whatever the boogeymen are.
I'll run this by you. I've been playing with this for several months now with this theory that I read this column by Emma Jo Morris in Breitbart, and she went to the Washington Correspondents Association annual dinner, which was about 3-4 months ago now. And she said she was sitting there, and all of a sudden it occurred to her this was not a political thing. She said, no, these people, it's not that they're liberal, it's that they're crazy. And she was actually being serious, and I've been kind of playing with the same idea here, that this is actual that there's mass mental illness going around. And I don't know if you saw this. This was just came out a couple weeks ago. I think it was a Rasmussen poll that asked Americans, like, how do you feel about your mental stability? And 1/3 of Americans said they felt mentally unstable. 1/3, 1 out of every 3 Americans. It's like, and so. Now, why did I bring that up? I got to remember.
Well, I can jump in and give you something there, which is that there also have been surveys about where they went and talked to conservatives and they went and talked to lefties, and they said, are you on medicines for psychological issues? Do you have what is your history of psychological issues? Are you currently experiencing, right? And big differences.
Oh yeah, that's been documented for 50 years. Yeah, no, liberals are way more emotionally unstable than conservatives. That's been, at this point, I think they just accepted it, because now they're trying to come up with reasons why. But the reason I actually brought this up is talking about the journalists, is I think my theory is that going into journalism is a great way to think you're going to change the world without actually to do any hard lifting. I don't know.
Well, that's a beauty. My response would be Elon Musk, who, like the rest of us, is not perfect, but Elon Musk wanted to change the world, and he worked pretty long hours and still works pretty long hours trying to change the world.
Yeah.
Whereas, yes, somebody who just is going to be a keyboard warrior.
Right. And that's basically, really, now more and more people can do it, but that's basically what it is, So, and that actually brings me to, I want to go back to the donors. So, and I'm going to ask for some speculation here too. George Soros as a man fascinates me because this man made an enormous amount of money in the capitalist system, and now it appears he's trying to dismantle it, which I don't quite understand too. Also, the other thing is this kind of aside. I've had a lot of economists tell me, and people he has written 3 books on his actual trading strategy, his stock trading strategy, and everyone who reads them says that they make no sense. So my accountant, the same woman I was talking about before, she thinks this is actually a scam. She thinks he's a criminal, but there's never been any evidence of this. But what drives this guy? Do you have any idea why is he doing this?
Well, it definitely is puzzling. I mean, one piece that has to be remembered, because somehow this fits too. In the 80s, he did a lot of good because he put his money into Eastern Europe and just bought them things like fax machines and copiers, photocopiers, which was incredibly valuable because that, they had even worse censorship than we have had in recent years. So just copiers and fax machines was a fantastic way to allow for there to be more communication in Eastern Europe than under communist domination. So that's an intriguing question. And that fits, by the way, again, people can believe some of the PR that they spit out, right? So he really did go to the London School of Economics, and he really did study under Karl Popper, who wrote the book, The Open Society, which Soros has stolen now to name all his different entity. There are dozens of Open Society named things around the world. And now Popper was pretty sensible and very much concerned about, of course, the brutal communist domination that was occurring at the time and the brutal Nazi domination that had occurred not long before. So Popper was concerned that you not have that kind of society. And Soros, as a young man, studied under him, and apparently Soros wanted to be the next Karl Popper, right? Wanted to be another brilliant public intellectual, but he just couldn't do it. As you say, none of his books, nobody has ever said this book written by George Soros, assuming it even was, is a brilliant book.
That's right. That's right.
So he doesn't. So I think
all I've ever heard is the opposite. So yeah.
Yeah. The thwarted part, right? That I want to, because if you are a really brilliant intellectual, well, you can really affect the world a lot, right?
Yeah.
So Popper did in his way, and John Locke was certainly important for our founding fathers. Read John Locke and learn stuff from him. And so if you can be one of those brilliant intellectuals, you can change the world and feel like you're a big man.
Yeah.
And I suspect that certainly is a powerful motivation for him. But the thing is, he's switched actually now to a different ideology that says there needs to be no borders. I mean, the man literally thinks having nations is wrong. I mean, I talk about these people wanting to centralize power in DC. God help us. He wants some global centralized power thing, because how dare Armenians or Greeks or Turks or Frenchmen love their countries and want to keep their countries going, right?
Scott, I have to tell you, that's the best explanation. I ask a lot of people that question, what drives George Soros? That's the best explanation I've heard. That actually makes sense, and so it's kind of like Hitler wanted to be a painter. The world would have been a way different place if he'd succeeded. So that's really fascinating. That really is. Yeah. Along the line of the donors too. So this was mentioned in some of your publicity materials only in passing. It was just a passing thing, but it did make me think of this. And you're talking about the influencer, or your publicist was, of Zuckbucks in the last election. Do you, based on what you know, do you think Mark Zuckerberg regrets that whole thing or not? About the $500 million to all those like little.
Sure. Well, it's. One of the things, it kills me. No one has ever put that much money into an election himself. And yet, despite my best efforts to get the New York Times and others to actually do serious deep dives, like, we have no idea who asked him to make that donation.
Right.
Which is shock. Nobody's ever asked the man. It's a totally legit journalism question. You don't have to think badly of him or the Zuckbuck operation. Maybe it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's a fascinating question. Who asked him?
And especially considering the amounts.
Yes,
like, holy
of course.
You know, he gave like $250 million to two different organizations, right?
Oh, no. That's the ballpark for the first checks that got.
Oh.
The total from him was $420 million to those two 501c3 charities,
right?
That overwhelmingly, especially the one that got most of the money. One only got a mere 70 million. The other got 350, roughly. And the one that got the over 300, it sent in every single battleground state, it overwhelmingly sent the money to Democrat jurisdictions. And we documented, by the way, capitalresearch.org. We don't say things like that if we can't document them. You can download our spreadsheets and crunch the numbers yourself, or send it to your accountant friend. So it's outrageous that nobody asked him who asked for that. And why did how'd you decide that? Now, of course, the most likely answer is David Plouffe, who was on a consultant to his philanthropy vehicle, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative at the time. And golly gee, who wrote an entire chapter in a book around the same time. The book was entitled something like How to Defeat, a Citizen's Guide for How to Defeat Donald Trump, something like that. Mm-hmm. And an entire chapter was devoted to voter registration, that it's just absolutely critical to do the right kind of voter registration if you're going to win an election, which is true. The guys won elections that way. And that's what all that money went for. Huh. Yeah. Fascinating. Yes, we don't know. Now, you said, does he regret it? Well, as far as I can tell, Zuckerberg is a weather vane, right?
Right.
Whichever, I don't think, I've never gotten the sense that he cares much about the substance of
that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah.
That's kind of what
And in this case, the thing I would give is, if you may remember that not long before the election, he wrote an apology letter to Trump, or sorry, well, not to Trump, but shoot, I'm trying to remember he wrote an apology about something or other, some other thing. It was he was writing it to the House Republicans because they were complaining, and I'm embarrassed I'm forgetting now what they were mostly complaining about, but he was apologizing to them, and then he stuck on a couple of paragraphs at the end about Zuckbucks, which nobody was pestering him about at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, I don't think that what the conservative critics say about it is true, that it was a grossly partisan outrage of an election, intervention. He said, I don't think that's true, but I still want to apologize, blah, blah. Now, when I saw that, it was, 2 months before the election, something like that, 3 months. I was stunned because the House people weren't pestering him about Zuckbucks. Nobody was pestering him. At that point, it's 2024. It's
right.
Years in the rear view mirror. He had stopped giving money like that for several years earlier. So it was fascinating that he threw that in there. Now, obviously, he threw it in there because he was trying to suck up to Trump before the election. And my assumption is that his own data crunchers at Facebook, right, where they're monitoring everything you and Uncle Johnny and Aunt Jane are saying, right? I'm betting you that his data people were telling him, man, Trump is going to win this election.
Yeah.
So he was just switching his weather vane to be like, oh, incoming power. Let me suck up to you. Let me apologize. Trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Please don't hurt me.
Yeah. I just assumed his people figured that out. They got plenty of, like you said, they have plenty of people who know how to crunch data really well. And that, even if you don't mind me asking about the 2020 election, now I'll give you a preface on this. I've spent most of my life in the entertainment business. So I still think that there was legitimate cheating going on, and my basis is the crowd sizes. I don't know if you know this. Biden, with one exception, never drew more than 200 people to any campaign event, the entire campaign. And Trump was averaging 20,000 people at his campaign events. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I've had people, I assume this is true where you live. I'm surrounded by liberals here, and I'm in Minneapolis. So, my friends are saying, well, you don't understand, Jim. People didn't vote for Trump. People didn't vote for Biden. They voted against Trump, but not everybody. I mean, that's like everybody, Anyway, do you have any thoughts, or did you have any data on that at all?
Well, I can't say that we studied all the many things that appear to be problematic in the 2020 election, right? I mean, it's so complicated too. Like there were states where some localities were allowing people to cure their ballots, but not other localities. There were there were judicial decisions to change voting rules that no legislature ever signed off on, which seems unconstitutional on its face to me. There are just all kinds of problems. And it was a terrible thing for democracy to have that kind of nonsense. But as I said, I only proclaim things I can document.
Right.
I can tell you that Zuckbucks, which 29 states, the majority of the whole population and electoral college, have now restricted or banned that kind of meddling.
Yeah.
And we were raising the alarm before the election about how dangerous this was, because the thing is, we already knew that they were using their own lefty C3 groups, I would argue illegally, to do partisan voter registration. They would say, oh, we were helping underserved communities.
Yeah.
But anyway, we knew that they used voter registration to manipulate elections and have been doing it for decades. And we've documented that thoroughly. But this was a new version. This time, instead of sending the money with Zuckbucks, the money didn't go to the lefty activist groups. It went into the actual government election offices at the state and mostly local level.
Mm-hmm.
And again, every politician knows perfectly well there are geographic areas I want to get turned out, and there are other areas I don't want to get turned out. Again, that's part of the simple machinery for winning elections, and everyone who is in the business knows that. Well, what were the Zuckbucks doing? They were putting on steroids the turnout for areas in the battleground states that had the most Democrat votes. And as I said, you can download our stats. We have, for every battleground state and a few others on top, we carefully have all that data, how much money went in there, how the vote changed in 2020 versus 2016. We also have, because, one of the typical complaint is that, well, there were more grants to Trump jurisdictions. Well, who cares about how many grants there were? The question is the money, not, hey,
right.
Hey, I'm going to give you a $50 grant. I'm going to give your sister a $5,000 grant. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
I think not. So anyway, that was one garbage rebuttal that you hear. The other garbage rebuttal you hear is that, well, if you were going to put money into Pennsylvania, for instance, a rather critical state, well, a lot more people live in Philadelphia, so Philadelphia is going to get more money. Well, that's absolutely true. But you know what, Jim? There's this little thing called per capita, and you can divide the money by the number of people. We didn't even divide it by the registered voters because, hey, vote suppression, right? Those places don't have as many registered. Okay, fine. We're not doing it by the registered voters. We will show you the money flows per capita, every man, woman, and child. And you know what, Jim? In every one of those battleground states, there was a gross disproportion. And I'm talking like double, triple, quadruple, quintuple.
I'm shocked.
Differences in the per capita grants for Democrat versus Republican areas.
Oh, but Scott, I do have to ask you, my impression is that for all the shenanigans, that stuff was actually legal. Is that true or not? Or more or less? Or
Okay, whoa. That's a complicated question. So let me so the FEC was asked about it, and the FEC said it was legal. And this is another bogus counter argument. The FEC said it was all legal. It's like, I am not aware of anyone saying that it violated any FEC rule, because it wasn't about FEC thing is for stuff like, giving money to PACs and political campaigns. This
Right.
this was C3 money, then going to the government. The question of legality is, you said 2, and you were right. All those hundreds of millions. Oh, and I should have added, by the way, Arabella kicked in 25 million, but we only found that out a year later. Oh, I would have torn my New York Times and other people apart about, don't you tell me that something Arabella's investing in is a nonpartisan effort. That's not true. And technically, it was not Arabella Advisors. It was their new venture fund. But anyway, their network was put in 25 million. Now, what was illegal, though, I would argue, was those 2 501c3 charities. They are the ones who decided where that grant money would go after they got their hundreds of millions. And they did it in a profoundly partisan way. And it is legal for C3s to be involved in voter registration only if it's in a strictly nonpartisan manner. And by the way, according to the IRS's own website, that doesn't just mean you can't intend to be helping one party or candidate. You cannot have the effect, according to the IRS, of doing that. Well, I have no trouble showing that there was a partisan effect in the 2020 election. And we did document all of that thoroughly. I testified all over the country about this. And now most of the country has forbidden any such thing in future.
So going forward here, it does appear that, at least for the short term, that the Democrats are basically in complete disarray. I'll predict, I do not think they're going to get their shit together before 2026. Don't think they will. Although I know that typically the party not in power usually does increase. I understand that. But going forward here, how do you, does this money matter if they're in complete disarray? I mean, right now, the Democratic enrollment rolls are at an all-time low, all this sort of stuff. Is what Arabella is doing going to be effective in the future or not? I mean, all sorts of money always is somewhat effective, but do you think it's going to make the difference in elections going forward?
Well, I'm not a political prognosticator, so I'm not making.
I want you to speculate
on 20. No. But what I'll give you an answer is, it is always nicer to have more money.
Yes.
And often the side with more money wins. And we track money very carefully because it does matter. At the same time, we also have a saying around the office: money is not magic. It is not a guarantee. If money were a guarantee, then Jeb Bush would have been the 2016 Republican nominee, and Hillary Clinton would have been the 2016 presidential winner.
Right.
There are lots of instances where underdogs and underfunded people do win. So money is never going to be a perfect predictor of political success.
Do you have another book coming out in your mind anyway?
Thank goodness no. But the new version of the Arabella one is just about a month old at this point. So don't rush me.
By the way, let's put the picture on the screen here. There's your book right there. So and we'll put a link to Amazon on our blog too. So
thanks so much. I think people find it very interesting.
Oh God, honest to God, this is, like I said, since your book came out, I wanted to have you on. So I want to thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you come back.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, you take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
That's Scott Walter. He's the head of the Capital Research Center, the conservative think tank, and his book is called Arabella. I gotta make sure I'm going to read this to make sure. Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I was not joking when I said I want to have that guy on since his book came out early this summer. So I'm really glad that happened. Anyway, this is part 2 of our show. We do not have a second guest tonight, so I'm going to pontificate for a while. I'm watching I'm watching myself on that video playback, and my hair is nuts. It occurred to me I look like Hitler without a mustache, and that made me think of. So I don't know if you guys have ever watched this show before. I got started in this whole thing years ago, before I even started working at Kong News. Years ago, I went to dinner with a bunch of people, a bunch of friends, and I'm sitting at the table, and I just happened to offhand mention that, well, there's more evidence that Hitler went to Argentina than he died in the bunker in 1945. And a really good friend of mine says, that's nuts. And I said, he says, you're wrong. I said, no. He said, if you want to go if you just want to weigh evidence, there's more evidence that he escaped than that he actually died in the bunker. And my friend I can't say that pissed him off, but he adamantly said that I was not correct. He said, it's not just that I disagree. He said, you're wrong. And I realized, well, okay, that's a start of something. I started thinking about that because I still maintain this, that there's more evidence that Hitler went to Argentina than that he died in the bunker. Now, I have some personal insight into this. I knew a Nazi who was very closely connected to Hitler. And this gentleman passed away about 25 years ago. And he was not in the bunker at the end, but if I'm right, he did visit the bunker while Hitler was in there. So you understand that I think it was the last week of January 1945, Hitler moved into the bunker in the Reichskanzlei garden underneath it, buried underneath it. And I think with one exception, didn't leave until he supposedly killed himself on April 30th, 1945. I think there's one instance where he left the bunker to award some medals to a bunch of servicemen, if I'm right. I think that was it. I think that's the only time he left the bunker in 5 months. So anyway, I knew this Nazi, and he told me that he knew for a fact that Hitler escaped Argentina and died in 1978. This is what he told me. And the people who say they've researched this, they claim that what they found out is Hitler died in 1962. My friend said he died in 1978. And he said he knew that because he got correspondence from some of his former service members who went with Hitler to Argentina. That's how he said he knew. Okay. All right, fine. There's another thing here too. As far as like Hitler's body, which has never been recovered. And the Russians thought they had it for years and years and years until 2006. They actually ran DNA testing on it. Turns out it's not Hitler. Matter of fact, it's not even a man. And I don't know if you know this, there's pictures taken of a very obvious dummy of Hitler laying in that trench where they supposedly set his body on fire. Supposedly. Another thing my friend told me about Hitler is that now, and this was well known, supposedly, by the Allied forces, about the fact that Hitler had 7 doubles, and most major leaders still in the world stage, still to this day, have body doubles to in case they're to get them so decoys. They're basically decoys. And Hitler had 7 of them, and that was known to the Allies. But my friends said what the Allies didn't know is that Hitler had the dental records of all 7 of these people changed to match Hitler's actual dentistry. So, in other words, supposedly they identified Hitler's remains from that cremated cremated remains in that trench, they identified them by his dental records. But my friend said that the doubles had the same dentistry that Hitler did to make sure so that they would pass as Hitler. So if you use that, and not only that, it was so there's photos of this double person. It's so plainly, obviously not Hitler, even though he's dressed like Hitler and he has the same Hitler mustache and all that sort of thing. It's basically considered a mockery at this point. And on top of that, I always figured it would be fairly easy to have gotten out of Berlin. As a matter of fact, Hitler's personal pilot, who was in the bunker at the end, supposedly, said he was urging Hitler to escape because he knew how easy it would be to do so. Now, I'm starting to have second thoughts about this based on new evidence that's come in. There's a guy named Mark Felden who does a series of videos on the Second World War on YouTube. And he has brought up the fact he fervently believes that Hitler died in the bunker, but he's got some points that he makes some points that nobody else makes. One is that Hitler supposedly killed himself on April 30th. The Russians surrounded the city of Berlin about 5 days earlier. Now, up until that time, it would have been quite easy to escape. Once the Russians had surrounded the city, it would have been more difficult. And not only that, the people who did try to escape on May 1st, after supposedly Hitler was dead, which was basically everybody else who was in the bunker, about 50 people who were living there. It was not a small place. Almost all of them got caught and or killed. Virtually none of them succeeded. And so that's one thing. Now, for Hitler to actually have flown out of Berlin, he would have had to have taken. There were tunnels from the bunker underneath most of the major thoroughfares in Berlin, and I understand he would probably have had to have walked about half a mile on the surface to do this to an airplane that was, and I can't remember the name of the street, but the Nazis had turned one of the major thoroughfares in Berlin into basically a landing strip. And that's where all the planes for the Nazi officers took off from. And most of them did get out until like the end, like I was saying. And you have to understand that there's a whole bunch of Nazi officers who did escape successfully to Argentina, because the deal is you flew out of Berlin. I think you went to Spain. I think it was. You got in a U-boat submarine, and that took you to Argentina. That's how they did it. And I think we're talking about dozens of people actually did this successfully. So the thing is, there was a template already set up for how this would work. But Felton's pointed out, and I think it's based on the success rate, he's probably right, that in the last 3 or 4 days of the war essentially ended on May 1st. In reality, technically, it ended on May 9th, 1945. But for all practical purposes, it ended on May 1st. But the 3 or 4 days before that, it might have been very difficult to actually get out of Berlin. And I don't know, and like I said, it turns out nobody who tried during that period has succeeded. So there's that. Then there's another thing too. And Felton just brought this up recently, and this just happened. So the thing is, this is, let me see, the 80th anniversary, supposedly, of Hitler's death. The place in Berlin, I've never been there, but I've seen numerous films of this because I'm kind of obsessed with this because I don't know what's wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. You don't want to know me. But I've never been there. I'm lucky. I've traveled the world a lot, but I've never actually been to Berlin. I've never seen this, but I've seen plenty of films where the Hitler's the Führer bunker was underneath the ground in the garden of the Reich Chancellery, which was basically the capital building of Germany. And this building was relatively new. It was built in 1938. It was only like 7 years old. It was enormous. Absolutely huge, but it was huge in an unusual way. It took up one very large block in Berlin, but in the middle was a courtyard or a garden, but that's not really a good description of it. Basically, the building went around the block on the edge, and then there was this giant courtyard or garden in the middle. The garden was way bigger than the building. So it's kind of, if you can imagine this building went around four sides of this block, all connected to each other, but the middle is hollow, right? Okay. So what's happened is the during the war and at the end, the Allies basically destroyed the right chancellery. It was completely down, completely, almost completely gone. They blew up the rest of it a little later, but it was almost pretty much, and it was, that's kind of sad, and I know this is weird, so forgive me, but it, as from an architectural standpoint, it was just stunning. It was an incredible building. It really was. But at any rate, what's there now is an apartment complex, believe it or not, and that was partly deliberate. The Germans didn't want to build anything remotely militaristic or Nazi-like on the spot. So what's there is a very large apartment complex that basically takes up three sides of this block. And what was the garden to the right chancellery is now a large parking lot. Okay, got that? Where Hitler's body was supposedly burned is right across the street, and believe it or not, it's in a parking stall on the street. Everyone, history has marked, the people know where the spot is. Okay. Now, they've had so many people come to the spot looking for this that the German government has finally put up a large sign in this parking lot explaining how this all worked out, where exactly they've marked off where the stairway into the bunker was. You can go see that. The bunker is apparently still there. They did not, they tried to destroy it, but the walls were so damn thick that it wouldn't blow up. So they basically filled it in with sand and covered it over, supposedly. So, all right. So, what am I getting at here, too? So, okay, it was the 80th anniversary of Hitler's death. And there were people on that day, that would be April 30th of this year, earlier this summer or this spring. There were people that put flowers on the actual spot where supposedly Hitler's body was burned, which, like I said, is basically a parking stall on the street across from this parking lot, right? All right, and there are people who would probably, say, who knows, I know relatives, whatever, I don't know. I'm not gonna try to, I'm not passing judgment on whether people like Hitler or not. I'm not. But Felton noticed, and other people noticed too, that on the other side of this parking lot, way of far away from where the actual Fuhrer bunker was, people also put flowers. And this gets back to, was it was Hitler's valet, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he said they asked him. This is on a video, not videotape, a filmed interview where the guy's on screen, he's on camera, and they asked him, "Did Hitler die in the rear bunker?" The guy said yes, and he said, "Is Hitler buried in the outside of the entrance where they burn?" And he said no. He said no. Hitler's buried on the other side of the garden. So he says, this guy claims that that part of the story was a ruse. Now, I've said all along, the whole thing's a ruse because they're Nazis. They lie. And not only that, all the people in the bunker were Hitler's closest associates. So they would lie for him. There's no doubt about that. But he said they lied about this one part, and that is they may have tried to burn Hitler's body in that spot, in that trench right outside of the bunker and exit. But he said that's not where they actually buried him. They buried him on the other side of the garden. And when I say garden here, this is a very large space. It's about the size of a football field, really, probably. So you're talking about a good 100 yards away. And that's where these people were piling up these flowers. And Felton said, well, somebody knows something. Now, he is requisited, apparently, the German government to exhume the spot. And he doesn't know if this is going to happen because apparently there were a lot. It was an unmarked grave. There are a lot of people buried in this spot. But with DNA testing now, they could probably figure out if you're talking about dozens of bodies, they could figure out if one of them was Hitler. And so I'm vacillating on this for the first time in a long time, because up till now it was pretty obvious to me that Hitler was not buried in that garden. That it's like I said, the Soviets thought they had his body, they didn't. Nobody's ever actually saw his dead body, all sorts of stuff like that. But now this is starting to change a little bit. I have a hard time believing that my Nazi friend Martin would have lied to me, and maybe he had bad information, but he was quite insistent about the fact that, yeah, he told me straight out, no, Hitler went to Argentina and died in 1978. Oh, well, there you go. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So what happened this week, it actually exactly coincided with the time we took off, is the Minnesota State Fair. And you have to be a Minnesotan. And if you know anything about state fairs in the United States, ours and Texas rivals were the largest ones. So the Minnesota State Fair is a permanent facility in a little town called Falcon Heights, which is literally on the border between Minneapolis and St. Paul. It literally straddles the two cities. And basically, the only thing in the town is the state fairgrounds. So the state fair happened, and it ended yesterday. It always ends on Labor Day. And why do people go? Really, really bad fair food. That's why you can get a big tub of chocolate chip cookies for $25, and the company that makes that, they are making out like bandits. I can't remember, some Marjorie is her name, or something like Margaret or something like that. This is the only thing her family does. They spend the entire year preparing for 2 weeks of sales at the state fair. They sell chocolate chip cookies at the state fair, and they make a fortune. It's like unbelievable. But what made the news this last week, which you caught this and maybe didn't, because it's not really a national story, but it kind of break into the national news about the fact that so Minneapolis has now, the leading candidate for mayor of Minneapolis is basically to the left of Zolan Mamdani from Manhattan. The guy's name is Omar Feta. He's Somali. And what you have to know here, and I don't think this is a racist comment. I'm not the only person who said this. The Somalians who moved to Minnesota have basically completely taken over the Democratic Party here, which is the reason he is the candidate. Now, he was elected the candidate, or anointed the candidate at the Minnesota DFL convention. Democratic convention. It turns out they cheated that election. And the amazing thing is here, these Somalians have a reputation for being extremely corrupt. Case in point, was it 48 of them or 51 of them got arrested for running what's called the Feed Our Future scandal, which was during COVID. They took this organization, Feed Our Future, took $250 million, $250 million from the U.S. federal government, ostensibly to feed poor kids who weren't getting fed because they weren't going to school. In other words, here in Minnesota, if your income drops actually, I think all students, in Minnesota, get free cafeteria food. I think it's part of the deal. So kids weren't going to school, so ostensibly they weren't being fed. Now they took $250 million. Did you hear me? $250 million, $250 million, and they fed almost nobody. So, and 48 of them ran off and bought giant houses and yachts and all sorts of stuff like that. And they got caught. Believe it or not, they did. They got caught. And if I'm right, I think of the 48 people, it might have been 51. Let's go with 48. Of the 48 people, I think all but 3 of them were native Somalians or from Somalia. I think. All but 3. There were 3 white people and 45 Somalians, and they all end up. And if I'm right, they've all gone to jail. All of them, all 48 of them. it's the largest scam, federal money scam in U.S. history. And this happened, and they were just convicted here like a few weeks ago. Some of them in mass trial, some of them were tried together, some of them were separately, whatever. But yeah, so that happened during the pandemic, and I think they were caught about 2 years ago. And there's that. Then there's Ilhan Omar herself, who is our representative right here in the congressional district that I'm sitting in right now. She has a reputation, and this isn't me. This is the Minneapolis Star Tribune, the local major newspaper here. They printed this that said that her campaigns, they pay people to vote for her. $200, matter of fact, you know. And I said this was the last election. I was on the horn here talking about. I said, here's the deal: if they're paying you, take the money and vote for someone else. They'll never know, and they won't. But supposedly she's been accused of this. Now it came out, and the reason I'm bringing this up is it came out just in the news today that in the last year, her net worth has gone up by $30 million. And if I'm right, her congressional salary, I think, is $174,000 a year. And the last 12 months, she's made $30 million. Well, how did you do that? Was she like getting stock tips from Nancy Pelosi? Or this whole thing, it's so corrupt. My friend David Strom, who's been on the show many times, he's the associate editor at Hot Air. He has just talked about the fact that these Somali families, they're criminals, and she's one of them. It's like, I'm just going to go. I mean, I have to say that's my personal opinion. I'm going to qualify that for legal reasons. But yeah, I think she's a criminal. It's like, so yeah, $30 million. Now, supposedly her husband, who may or may not be her brother, nobody's ever been able to figure this out. That's the other thing too. Her personal life is so shady that she may be married to a brother and nobody really knows. Okay. But supposedly he's a tech entrepreneur and he sold 2 companies. And ostensibly, this is where this money comes from. Ostensibly. But the thing is, the Somalians here in Minneapolis are so involved in deep corruption, nobody believes it at this point, including me. So, at any rate, and so, okay, speaking of Democrats, and we're going to end on this too, because this is just unbelievable. So, Gallup, major poller in the United States, pollster, polled 1,000 people August 1 through 20. Asked them, are you satisfied with how things are going in the U.S.? If I'm right, that is the question, right? Okay. 76% of Republicans said yes. 0% of Democrats said no. 0. Now, I'm going to qualify this to be very precise. It was actually 0.4%, but they round this, and that's less than half. So it's 0. It was statistically 0, which if I did my math correctly, that means out of 1,000 people, 2 of them, only 2 Democrats said that they thought they were satisfied with where Americans were going. None of the Democrats. Now, and I was not the only person who brought this up during vacation. Greg Gutfeld was talking about this on the 5, and the fact is, it's the first poll. He said this, and it's the same with me. It's the first poll I've ever seen where 0 was actually one of the results. I mean, you have to understand how. All I can say is that there's a bunch of people in America who are brainwashed. That's the only thing I can say. 0. No, out of the 1,000 people in this poll, and we can assume roughly 50% of them were Democrats. It was probably like more like 45 or 47%. But let's just go with 50%. 500 people. Out of 500 people, only 2 of them said they were satisfied. Out of roughly 500. Now I see this in my regular life. I got all sorts of friends. I even have Republican friends, conservative friends who hate Donald Trump's guts. But I had lunch with an old friend of mine last week, and she is so despondent. She said, "My God, it's like It's like you were in Nazi Germany, which I'm coming full circle here. And I had dinner this weekend with a good friend of mine, and he is a Republican, and he said the same thing. He thinks that what's going on is like terrible. And here's my deal on this, especially the crime situation. All right, the federal government has the ability and right to go into to bring the National Guard into Washington D.C. because the federal government technically runs Washington D.C. The only reason they have elections is because Congress lets them. It's a federal district. The only reason that city exists is to house the government of the United States. Right? Got that? Now, right, obviously there's other business there too. It's a real city, but that's the reason it exists. And because of that, the federal government, the Congress, and the president actually run Washington, D.C. So I don't know if the president can do it, but if Congress were to say you can't have elections anymore, you don't have a mayor. Matter of fact, for the longest time they didn't. I think if I'm right, I think it's 19. No, they only had a elected mayor since 1970 or something like that. If I'm correct, for the longest time, Congress actually administered Washington, D.C. So the president has a perfect right to send troops in there, right? Now, they may look kind of, Stasi-ish or Soviet style, whatever, but yeah, you have the perfect right to do it. I don't know if they have the right to do that in Chicago. I don't know actually if that's legal. But here's the problem with that. And that is it's so obvious that people want them to. I mean, that's the problem here. The Democratic governments of these major cities have completely failed, and Chicago's the worst. This last weekend, 58 people shot. 58. 58. Somebody brought up there's more people shot in Chicago every year that was shot in like Korea or something. I can't remember what war. No, Afghanistan. I think it was Afghanistan. More people are shot now on a weekly basis in Chicago than were shot per week when we were fighting the Afghanistan war. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's a complete, utter breakdown of the system. And I think the president has the right to declare an emergency. I do, because that's crazy shit. It is. But the thing is, so, the country of Argentina is going through this right now. They elected a guy named Milei, who's essentially kind of like the South American version of Trump. And he's come in, their government has been completely incompetent for years and years, the federal government of Argentina. And this guy's come in, he's completely changed everything. He's completely cleaned the place up in like a year. They had crime through the roof, now it's gone. All sorts of stuff like that. And you could make an argument if you know I don't know the vagaries of the Argentinian constitution, but I know people have said that some of the stuff that his administration has done might not actually be legal, but no one's complaining because he's succeeding. He's doing what people wanted them to do for years and years. And Trump has made a point here. He says they're not 80-20 issues, they're 97-3 issues. I think they're 90-10 issues. But the point is that people are desperate to have this crime stop. So I don't know, even if it's illegal, if people want it. Now, the other thing is, and I want to talk about this in future shows too. What's going on in England right now, or the UK actually, the Great Britain. They're on the verge of civil war because the government is very specifically doing stuff the public does not want to do, and this is the problem with a parliamentary government. And that is, we elect our president. They don't elect their prime minister, not directly. And in some ways, not even indirectly. What happens is that they elect members to parliament, and then parliament picks the leader. And the way it works is that the leader can call an election, but but there's maximum time frames where he doesn't have to. And they're 4 years away from an election. And so the people don't elect their leader there, and I just think this is a huge failure. If you look at parliamentary governments around the world, and the majority of them are like that. I mean, we have a relatively unusual situation here. Our government's relatively unique. Parliamentarism is kind of the standard worldwide. And this is a huge flaw in that system. is that people don't actually elect their national leader. And Keir Starmer over in England, he's been just a colossal failure. I mean, that government has completely failed the people, and they're on the verge of civil war. They are. It's like this is not going to be. And there, people are saying it's going to happen because there's no other. No one can see any other way out of this because the government is not going to change. They aren't, and they don't have to. So, at any rate, I brought that up because that's the thing. So, the thing is, I have to admit, I'm uncomfortable with the president sending the National Guard in another city. Washington was fine, but somewhere else, all of a sudden, you look like the Nazis. And I hate to make that comparison, but because everyone does, but it's true. You look like the Soviet Union or China. That you're literally sending the army into a city. But the thing is, look at the alternative. That's the problem. Look at the alternative. People actually want this at this point, you know. So, and I use Argentina as a positive example. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out everywhere. I want to thank you folks for watching. Tomorrow night, Wayne Murrow's coming by. He's the CEO of the John Birch Society, one of the original conservative think tanks. I don't even know if you call them a think tank. They're a conservative organization in the United States. Like I said, I was hearing about this. I was learning about this when I was in grade school. So it's actually, in some ways, this is kind of thrilling for me to talk to this guy. So he's our guest tomorrow. So, and we'll talk about some of this stuff we just talked about in the last few minutes, I'm sure. And Thursday night, Ryan Reisinger is coming back. He's the author of Land Rich Cash Poor, which is about family farming in the United States and how that's going. The short answer, not well. And the reason we're having him on Thursday is because today the paperback version of his book was released. So he's coming on Thursday. We might have another guest on Thursday too, but I don't want to announce it yet. So we will get to having two guests show sooner or later. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it a lot. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. You sleep well, folks. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.